faithfully convey value and interpret great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Club. Today, I'm going to introduce you to a book called Reasonable Doubts. The subtitle is How the O.J. Simpson Case Affected America. The O.J. Simpson murder case was a globally sensational case in the 1990s. In 1994, former American football star and Hollywood celebrity O.J. Simpson was accused of murdering his ex-wife Nicole Brown and her boyfriend Ronald Goldman. The case attracted massive attention due to the defendant's fame, media exposure, and its controversial social issues like domestic violence and racial tensions. The O.J. Simpson case sparked widespread attention across American society. What made it even more sensational was that Simpson first surrendered, then changed his mind. He then led police on a car chase that became known as the Chase of the Century. To capture Simpson, police dispatched helicopters and dozens of police cars for a highway pursuit. Eventually, he was arrested, with the whole nation watching live on TV. The trial officially began January 24th, 1995, lasted 253 days, and finally concluded with a verdict on October 3rd, 1995. CNN estimated about 140 million Americans tuned in for the verdict, dubbing it the trial of the century. Prosecutors believed they had ironclad evidence, such as the defendant's spousal abuse history, DNA evidence, and testimony from expert witnesses. At that time, most Americans believed Simpson was guilty. However, Simpson's high-priced Dream Team defense exploited flaws in police evidence and convinced the jury Simpson was acquitted in criminal court. But in the subsequent civil suit brought by victims' families, the jury unanimously held Simpson liable for the deaths and ordered $33.05 in damages, and brought off $51 million. This highly controversial trial put America's justice system under intense scrutiny, allowing re-examination of its strengths and flaws. Author Alan Dershowitz had dual roles: a renowned defense attorney who strategized for Simpson's dream team, and Harvard's youngest ever law professor, both insider and outsider. Well, this gave Dershowitz unique insights into the Simpson case. In this book, using first-hand experience and professional analysis of America's justice system, Dershowitz explains why Simpson was acquitted in criminal court and what reflections this trial of the century brought to the American legal system. Now, I'll explain the book through three key aspects. First, why was Simpson acquitted? Second, what core principles of the U.S. justice system did the Simpson case demonstrate? Third, what reflections did the Simpson case prompt about the American justice system? Let's begin with the first aspect. Why was Simpson acquitted? In June 1994, police discovered the bodies of Simpson's ex-wife Nicole Brown and her boyfriend Ron Goldman at home, both with multiple stab wounds from a sharp weapon. The cause of death was stabbing. Based on the crime scene and blood DNA evidence, police quickly focused on Simpson as the suspect. A key piece of evidence was a bloody glove found at Simpson's home and another at the crime scene. These two gloves were a matching pair of a style Simpson had worn, with blood from both Simpson and the victims on them. Additionally, police found blood-stained socks on Simpson's bedroom floor. Police believe these socks were worn during the crime. Besides blood evidence, a knit cap from the crime scene and Ron Goldman's clothing also contained Simpson's hair.
As a beloved football superstar, Simpson's clean image led police and prosecutors to improperly release damaging information to sway public opinion and influence the court. For example, police anonymously leaked previously mentioned evidence to media.
They also released a tape of Simpson's ex-wife crying for help.
On the tape, a man believed to be Simpson yelled angrily. Later, other unverified and ultimately unreliable information gradually surfaced in media reports.
All this information influenced public perception of the case.
While many believed Simpson guilty, his defense attorneys found flaws in the evidence collection process. The first major flaw was evidence authenticity.
Among the most damaging evidence against Simpson were the blood analysis and DNA test results. But the defense argued that all this evidence had major issues. For example, police claimed they found victim Ron Goldman's blood on socks discovered on Simpson's bedroom floor. However, the crime scene photos presented by prosecutors during trial raised serious doubts. After the crime, police investigated Simpson's home. A photo taken at 4:13 p.m. showed no socks, but at 4:35 p.m., just 20 minutes later, socks appeared in the photos. Later, the defense discovered high levels of preservative EDTA in the sock's blood, a chemical not found in human blood, but used to preserve blood in test tubes. The defense argued this suggested the blood was likely fabricated. Another example, the crime scene report indicated victim Ron Goldman had engaged in a fierce struggle with the killer. Stabbed over 30 times, he died from a severed carotid artery and massive internal bleeding, suggesting the killer should have been drenched in blood. Yet, Simpson's Ford Bronco had only minimal blood traces, and police found Simpson's own blood at his home. But these bloodstains were uniformly sized, clotted, with smooth edges. If Simpson were injured, there'd be heavy initial bleeding that gradually decreased, impossible to produce uniform drops. Additionally, LAPD's mishandling contaminated blood samples collected at the scene. Thus, DNA test results were unreliable. For instance, 4 LAPD detectives entered Simpson's home after investigating his ex-wife's residence. Their boots and uniforms likely transferred blood traces, compromising samples collected at Simpson's house. Secondly, Detective Vanader collected Simpson's blood sample but didn't send it to the lab, instead taking it 20 miles back to the crime scene in an unsealed vial for 3 hours. Plus, the bloody glove's authenticity was questioned.
To prove Simpson was the killer, prosecutors made him try on the gloves before the jury, where he struggled painfully to put them on.
The defense immediately noted the gloves were too small, meaning they couldn't be Simpson's. Beyond evidence authenticity, police searched Simpson's private home without a warrant, invalidating the search itself. Under the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, citizens are protected from unreasonable searches and seizures of their persons, houses, papers, and effects. Police must first obtain a search warrant from a judge before conducting a search. Warrantless searches are generally considered illegal, and any evidence obtained is excluded from court. However, there are exceptions, such as if the subject consents to the search or in emergency situations. For example, if someone is in immediate life-threatening danger or evidence might be destroyed, police can conduct a warrantless search. In the Simpson case, after finishing the crime scene investigation, police went to Simpson's home. Without a warrant, Officer Fuhrman climbed the wall into Simpson's property, opened the gate, and then searched the home with 3 other officers.
Officers claimed they only wanted to inform Simpson about his ex-wife's death and discuss custody arrangements for the children.
However, officers found blood on the door handle of a white Ford Bronco outside Simpson's house, and after ringing the bell with no response for a long time, they feared someone inside might be in life-threatening danger, which could be considered an emergency. The defense argued that once police entered and found Simpson's daughter and friend home with no danger, the emergency ceased to exist. Police should have contacted a judge to get a warrant before continuing the search, but they proceeded anyway. Only after finding the bloody glove and other key evidence at Simpson's home did police apply for a search warrant. Although during the preliminary hearing, the judge accepted the police explanation and allowed the evidence to be submitted, this gave the defense leverage to question the credibility of police testimony. And it's, especially led Detective Vanader, an experienced officer. It's hard to believe he went straight to Simpson's home after the crime scene, not out of suspicion, but just to notify him of his ex-wife's death.
To further challenge evidence credibility and police bias, the defense played the race card. since Simpson is black and his ex-wife white, with some whites disapproving of such interracial marriage.
The prosecution had a key witness, the officer mentioned earlier.
During the Simpson home search, Fuhrman climbed the wall to let others in, searched the guest house alone, and only called other detectives 18 minutes later to announce finding a bloody glove.
It was also Fuhrman who discovered blood-stained socks on the second-floor bedroom floor, crucial evidence used to accuse Simpson. Fuhrman, a white officer, was accused of racism by the defense, who even set up a tip line for public leads. Shockingly, evidence showed Fuhrman had made vile racist remarks, including recordings where he used the N-word, a key factor that turned the case. The defense argued Fuhrman's racism made him likely to plant evidence. When questioned, Fuhrman invoked his Fifth Amendment right, refusing to answer, destroying his credibility with the jury. After the trial, Fuhrman was actually sentenced to 3 years for perjury in this case. To summarize, we've covered police evidence and collection issues. Additionally, prosecutors made strategic errors.
For example, with 9 black jurors, 8 being women, prosecutors wrongly focused on domestic violence.
They presented extensive evidence of Simpson's abuse history, but black women cared more about racism than domestic violence. So Fuhrman's racist remarks made them more likely to believe Simpson was framed. Given all this, the jury acquitted Simpson, a result many found incomprehensible.
But the case revealed 2 core principles of America's justice system: reasonable doubt and the exclusionary rule.
This brings us to the second aspect, reasonable doubt, the standard for criminal convictions in America. Simpson's acquittal happened because the jury felt guilt wasn't proven beyond reasonable doubt. What is reasonable doubt? Different courts in the U.S. have varying interpretations of this concept. Generally, reasonable doubt means a defendant can only be convicted if prosecution evidence eliminates any logical possibility of innocence based on facts. Put simply, proving possible guilt isn't enough. Even 99% certainty fails. Prosecutors must provide evidence making jurors 100% certain of guilt to eliminate reasonable doubt. For example, if a murder weapon has both defendant's fingerprints and unknown third-party prints, and prosecutors can't identify or disprove that person's involvement, that creates reasonable doubt about the defendant's guilt. Another example, in a sexual assault case where the victim claims non-consent, but defense shows evidence of consent, like her inviting defendant in while sober, witnesses seeing her initiate intimacy, or post-incident threats to expose the encounter, this could create reasonable doubt against rape charges. In Simpson's trial, Judge Ito instructed jurors they must be thoroughly convinced of guilt after weighing all evidence. As discussed earlier, blood evidence issues and Fuhrman's racism prevented eliminating reasonable doubt. Black juror Brenda Morin, 45, stated in interviews she didn't believe police searched Simpson's home without a warrant just to notify him. Morin revealed some jurors suspected police conspiracy to fabricate evidence.
Ultimately, while jurors may not have believed Simpson innocent, they still acquitted him.
This verdict thrust the reasonable doubt standard into intense scrutiny. Many believe the better to free the guilty than convict the innocent standard lets criminals escape justice. They argue prosecutors' burden of proof should be lowered, allowing convictions under less strict standards. Like in civil trials where the preponderance of evidence standard applies, meaning whichever side is more convincing wins. This explains Simpson's loss in the civil case. So, why adopt stricter standards for criminal trials? Mainly because wrongful convictions carry far heavier costs than civil errors. Defendants risk losing not property or money, but life and freedom. These fundamental human rights. The justice system prefers freeing the guilty over convicting the innocent. Beyond reasonable doubt, the second principle highlighted by Simpson's case is the exclusionary rule. This means evidence obtained illegally, unless during emergencies, gets excluded even if it proves guilt. For example, if a suspect confesses to murder during police torture and reveals a burial site, even if the body is found with the suspect's DNA, that evidence can't be used. Many criticize this rule for potentially freeing criminals. But the exclusionary rule ultimately protects human rights within America's justice system. Its purpose is to prevent law enforcement from violating constitutional rights to obtain evidence. And lawmakers believe values like privacy and freedom from government overreach matter more than individual case truths. As the author states, America's justice system rejects pursuing truth through unjust means. Truth isn't its sole purpose. During trials, the system balances truth, justice, and privacy protections. Upholding these non-truth values may indeed free some guilty defendants. As mentioned earlier, police entered Simpson's home without a warrant to obtain evidence. Theoretically, such evidence should have been excluded from jury consideration. Although the police's arguments convinced the judge, they didn't convince the jury, and ultimately Simpson was acquitted. However, the controversies over illegal evidence gathering and perjury in the Simpson case forced police to reflect that such practices must be eliminated, otherwise, evidence credibility could be questioned, and how, preventing jurors from eliminating reasonable doubt. To avoid acquittals like this, police made improvements. For example, after the Simpson case, NYPD Commissioner Bratton introduced a program to train officers on truthful court testimony. All right, to summarize, the Simpson case revealed two key principles in America's justice system: reasonable doubt and the exclusionary rule. These principles also sparked widespread debate due to Simpson's acquittal. Besides that, the case involved social controversies that prompted reflections on the American justice system. Now, in Part 3, we'll discuss what controversies the Simpson case ignited and what reflections it brought. Here, we'll focus on three issues: race, public opinion, and money. Let's start with the race issue. Race has long been a constant topic of debate in American society. In the Simpson case, race was also a focal point. Some even say Simpson was acquitted precisely because of racial factors. As mentioned earlier, the Simpson jury had 12 members, 9 of whom were Black. The high proportion of Black jurors relates to America's pre-trial system, which determines if there's enough evidence to support prosecution. If it's a judge-led pretrial, the defense can participate and see key prosecution evidence. Some areas use grand jury pretrials, where selected grand jury members decide whether to support prosecution. The defense cannot participate. To avoid exposing evidence, Simpson prosecutor Clark chose a grand jury pretrial in downtown LA, resulting in a mostly Black jury pool, leading to predominantly Black grand jurors and later trial jurors. So, was race really the reason Simpson won this trial? We can't know the jurors' true thoughts, but everyone views the world through their own experiences. Sociology professor Neil Hunt from USC formed separate white and Black juries to examine their different perceptions of Simpson case evidence. The findings revealed significant segregation in American society leads to vastly different life experiences, with Black people facing more discrimination. Thus, Black and white perspectives on the same person or event often differ dramatically. Research by Vanderbilt law professor Nancy King also confirmed jurors' racial backgrounds influence judgments. Black defendants face higher conviction rates from white jurors, while both races tend to acquit their own. Well, as a Simpson defense team member, the author admitted attacking police credibility via racism claims would have resonated less with a majority white jury. The second controversy sparked by Simpson's case was media influence on trial outcomes. Massive media exposure meant the case faced two trials, one in the court of public opinion and another with the actual jury. Their conflicting verdicts became central to the controversy. From the outset, media intensely covered Simpson's case. As mentioned, police and prosecutors used media to build momentum pre-trial. Pre-trial, many outlets aggressively portrayed Simpson as a killer to stake their positions. For example, Time magazine's cover story, An American Tragedy, darkened Simpson's mugshot to make him appear more dangerous. Why? The author believes media and prosecutors had a symbiotic relationship. Media needed exclusive secrets, while prosecutors controlled those secrets. Thus, media rarely criticized prosecutors or ran negative coverage, fearing loss of access. Once the trial began, public perception was shaped by media, because most information was filtered secondhand through media and experts. For instance, during Simpson's glove demonstration, an Associated Press reporter in the front row noted,
It was clear those gloves just didn't fit.
but the New York Times quoted a legal expert saying, while the gloves were tight, he did get them on. Some media outlets republishing NYT articles even changed headlines to, "The gloves perfectly matched Simpson's hands." Clearly, for those not watching live or via broadcast, such reporting was misleading. To counter one-sided prosecution narratives and shaped public perception, defense lawyers agreed to televise the trial. The author believes this helped Simpson. Even without TV, the media circus would continue. Broadcasting showed actual courtroom rigor, reducing bias from rumors. Still, media influenced public opinion, and judges and jurors couldn't fully escape it. Especially if prejudiced before trial, they might judge unfairly. For instance, some accused Judge Ito of bowing to public pressure by not applying the exclusionary rule. But actually, Ito had both authority and valid reasons. Excluding all warrantless evidence would have tossed most core proofs, effectively acquitting Simpson prematurely. But Ito wanted the jury to decide. The author admits that with such media scrutiny, no judge could exclude key evidence, leaving jurors nothing to deliberate. Post-trial, many argued for limiting media access to avoid undue pressure. Actually, U.S. judges always retain power to restrict media. Courts can still bar reporters. The author believes press access shouldn't be restricted. While media might amplify flaws and broadcasts exposing perfections, in a democracy the public deserves to see justice at work. The gap between media trials and actual proceedings should narrow, not be hidden, or the system loses public trust. Beyond race and public opinion, the third debate sparked by Simpson's case is whether a defendant's wealth affects trial outcomes. After Simpson's verdict, many claimed his acquittal resulted from affording expensive lawyers and hiring world-class forensic experts. If the defendant were poor, they'd be forced to accept prosecution's forensic evidence. A study of America's justice system shows money decisively influences juries by buying thorough investigations that uncover truth-altering facts. So, did Simpson literally buy his innocence? The author argues money can't buy acquittal in a clear-cut, guilty case. But when police or prosecution leave reasonable doubt, money helps defense challenge evidence and uncover stronger counterproof. Fixing this unfairness isn't about capping how much the rich spend on defense. Rather than leveling resources down, we should lift the poor up, giving all defendants Simpson-like access to challenge evidence and protect rights. With that, we've covered the essence of reasonable doubts. The Simpson case was the most representative criminal trial of 1990s America. To this day, people debate Simpson's actual innocence. Regardless of truth, this case prompted vital reflection on America's justice system's strengths and flaws. No system is perfect. Justice seeks not just truth, but balance between fairness, human rights, efficiency. For example, excluding evidence prevents police abuse, even if it frees some guilty. Such trade-offs are inevitable and unpopular, but drive continuous reform. Perhaps that's the true legacy of this trial of the century. Such reasonable doubt. That wraps up our discussion of this book. Reading notes are below the audio. See you next time.